Welcome back to another episode of St. Francis Ministries Conversations video podcast series. I'm Father Andrew O'Connor, the Executive Officer for Mission and Ministry. And today I'm delighted to be joined by two St. Francis Ministries legends, Cheryl Rathbun and Trish Bryant. We're going to talk all things St. Francis Ministries today as we celebrate our 80th anniversary here at St. Francis. And I might just ask you guys to introduce yourselves. So tell me who you are.
Well, I'm Cheryl Rathbun, Trish Bryant's best friend.
Okay.
We've worked together many years, so we're delighted to be here.
Many years. You want to tell us how many it's been?
Well, Cheryl's better at math, but our whole careers basically.
Well,
I came a few years after
45
Cheryl started.
and then 36 for
and
you.
36 for me at the same organization.
It's remarkable.
Yeah,
It's
it was my first job out of college, and I think that was you as
Same
well.
here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked at the Ellsworth unit, and Trish worked at the Salina unit.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll dive in a little bit to sort of, like I said, some of the history, the longer term history, and then your guys' personal history with the organization. I think as we celebrate our 80th anniversary, we can't but help talk about Father Bob Mize, who was our founder, started the St. Francis Boys Home in Ellsworth, Kansas, in 1945. Cheryl, you have something really special with you today. Do you want to share with us a little bit about that?
So I have Father Bob and his boys book. I'm just extremely fond of it. My first one actually had his autograph in it.
Oh, nice.
When the first time I met him. And so I've bought multiple books and give them to new staff when they come, because this book just describes him so well. And if you know anything about St. Francis, Father Bob and St. Francis are very, very much alike in terms of coming from wealthy families but shedding all their wealth and giving to everyone else.
Yeah.
So, but I love this book.
Yeah. So you have some personal experience with Father Bob. You met him. Had you both met him?
We have. I've met him. I've not had very many conversations with him like Cheryl has. So.
Yeah. So I think I had been at the Ellsworth unit as a social worker for about a year the first time I met him. He lived in California by then, was retired from, and actually his formal title was bishop, but we all still called him Father Bob. And I got the opportunity to meet him. And the funny thing about him is when he met you and didn't know you, he always had little note cards that he would write on about you.
Okay.
He would write your name, when you started, what position you had. And he traveled with those cards. And the next time he saw you, so I got to see him like 4 or 5, 6 times.
Yeah.
He would pull his little card out and say, "Oh yeah, you're Cheryl. I was Cheryl Karchevsky back then.
Okay.
You're Cheryl Karchevsky. You're a social worker. You came here. How are you doing? How do you like it?" And he was just an amazing, gentle man. But I'll tell you the thing that stood out the most every time we talked, he was mostly interested in the staff, not the kids. And I thought that was very different. And because, would you like to meet some of the boys? No, I just want to talk to the staff. And his view was, if the staff were happy and doing well, he knew the kids would be doing well. And that's why he wanted to know the staff and how they were. And he was just amazing like that.
Yeah. I think that philosophy continues on in the way that we desire to treat the people who work for St. Francis Ministries, really across every position, across every level of the organization. That people first priority is really key, and it comes from him.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a recollection of meeting Father Bob?
I actually do remember the first time I met him, and Cheryl and I were just previously talking about this at the St. Francis 50th anniversary. He had come back to Kansas, and we had a kind of a ceremony up at the Salina Country Club, and we had former boys there, former staff, and a lot of the current staff. So that was probably the only opportunity I really had a chance to speak with him. But like Cheryl said, his belief that if you had good employees, that was really your best asset, because then they would take excellent care of the children that we served, which was, why we were all there.
Yeah.
He would come back every year. So again, when I started in 78, and I think even you in 84, we just had the 3 residential. So the one in Lake Placid, Camelot, Ellsworth, and Salina, all of them identical programs, 26 boys. We all got together. We implemented the same, best practice models for the kids. That was a really big deal. But every year, Ellsworth and Salina took turns hosting an event that all the old boys and staff were invited to. So one year at Ellsworth, one year at Salina. And Father Bob would come when he could. And he always had a caretaker who would drive him across California. He never flew. He would drive him from California to Kansas, and he would attend those events. Yeah. And so it was just phenomenal, just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable to think, he founded the first home in 1945, and by 1960, only 15 years of his leadership, he then kind of wildly became a bishop in Southern Africa, in the Anglican Church there, and later tossed out for his stand against apartheid, and then was in California for many years thereafter. But he out of 80 years, 15 is just a sliver, and yet his dream, his vision has persisted for all these years. What do you think that's about?
I think he was a visionary like no one else. I mean, when you read the book, when you talk to him, the Time magazine article, he really was way ahead of his time in terms of what kids needed. When people throw the term around trauma-informed or trauma-responsive practice, he was doing that back in 45. So part of him, before he actually got the Ellsworth unit, was because he was this single priest, in an Episcopal church, you can be married, and he didn't. His dad was actually Bishop of Salina back then. Yep. He would end up getting these kids that came out of the reformatory and didn't have anywhere to go, so they would stay with him. And he knew that being punitive, harsh consequences was not what worked for those kids, but that loving them for who they were, moving them forward. He was just so visionary in that view. And so when he started Ellsworth, it was interesting because there were still people that lived there that remembered when he opened and the negative things about it. There was a local sheriff who fought hard to not allow him to start it in Ellsworth. His 10-year-old grandson, this sheriff, was one of the first residents.
Oh,
fascinating.
Really?
Yeah. And the superintendent of schools was telling me all these stories. And so it was just so fun. But he was really focused on not just love, but forgiveness and spirituality. Yeah. The whole piece about spirit, mind, and body that even Joint Commission adopted that later. He was doing in 1945 with those kids and their families.
Yeah. Yeah, and it when you read the story, it's remarkable just the sort of the persistence he had in what he would call therapy in Christ, but really boils down to unconditional love and opportunities for forgiveness and reconciliation and accountability and I always sometimes sort of joke, reading prayers at the kids, but that spiritual element of it as well. And his desire for these initially these young boys to become productive members of society, and that wasn't going to happen by throwing them in jail or throwing them out into the street, right?
Or having them. His other vision that was very different was he wanted them to go to public school, have jobs in the community, so that they would know what it was like to be a member of the community, and that was so important to him.
Yeah. And when we were doing a little research on something a while ago in the foundation, and discovered that at one point there was acacia law or acacia rule against bringing students in from other school districts to
Oh.
to play sports, and that part of that goes back to St. Francis, because the boys would come from all over the state, and he would put them in the local school, and they would want to play sports naturally, and all of a sudden, the local team was doing so much better with these boys being brought in from
there were
everywhere
some good
across Kansas.
Players, remember that? Oh my
Yes.
gosh!
We really heard a lot from the community once some of the kids got involved in their local sports, and a big football player that outweighed most of the other kids on the team was a prize possession for some of those coaches.
Yeah,
and many
of them would take them into their homes then.
Yes, afterwards, kids that would, and in fact, a young man that went to live with the superintendent after he just passed away, Dave. And so, they didn't want those kids to leave, and it was just really fun. They were adopted in later years. Yeah.
So you guys came kind of at the beginning of a sort of a new era, if you will, for St. Francis. Time of sort of starting to branch out a little further and a little further. Tell me, what was your first job at St. Francis Ministries, Trish?
Well, my first job was I ran the horse program.
Okay.
I started as just a youth care worker. Really, Cheryl and I had different career paths, but, we ended up meeting at different levels throughout our years. But like she had said earlier, I started in the Salina campus. And, I just filled in a lot of the holes that they needed out there. And, when I first started, and I really coming from a middle-class family in rural Kansas, I was so overwhelmed by how these kids had been treated that it just got to my heart. And I think that's one of the reasons I never left. What Father Bob had started, and we were able to take care of these kids and give them other opportunities that they may have never had. And so one of my favorite things at St. Francis, even though I retired as a COO, I have to tell you, running the horse program, I spent years doing that. And the ability of those kids to communicate improved so much when we could get them outside on the back of a horse. I later became a clinician, and I always told everybody I got much more therapy done on the back of a horse riding down a road than I ever did with somebody sitting across the table from me. They would just open up and really talk about things. And Cheryl was one of the best clinicians I've ever met, and I've met a lot of them over the years. And she just brought a wealth of knowledge and expertise to St. Francis.
Oh, you're a sweetheart.
Well, it's true. And, I know I've said that before, but she's just a great clinician. And even when I'm going to have to brag about Cheryl a little bit. You can tell we've been friends for a lot of years.
Everyone should have a friend like that, by the way.
I tell you, the thing I always most admired about you, Cheryl, was even when we became involved with large groups throughout the state of Kansas, Cheryl was never about just St. Francis. She was about all the kids. She didn't care what organization they were at or where they came from. She was there to help children and families be the best that they could be. And I always admired that about you, Cheryl.
So when did you start, and what was your position? And
so I started in 1978. I was a social work bachelor level young lady, and started out as a social worker at Ellsworth. In fact, I grew up in the military, so I didn't grow up in Kansas and had not planned to stay. But I got this job. I was up against a girl from K-State and KU, and this Pittsburgh grad got it. I really hadn't planned on staying, but two big things happened. One, I fell in love with my job, and my job was to work with the families, the schools, and the courts. And of course, I knew the boys really, really well, but that, I think, started my knowledge base of, if you don't work with the families, anything you do with that child, there was this belief, if you could get the child to change, and many of them didn't even need to, that they'll go home and still be successful. My view was, you get the family involved and get them to see they have to do things too, and engage them and not make them feel like they were failures with their child. And so that's when I became really invested in that part of the young men's journey. And so the interesting thing, and I'll just say this too, I'm terrified of horses. terrified. But I would tell you, I knew that the horse therapy was better than anything I could do in an office. So I fought for that program all the time. So I always admired Trish, being able to do that. And I can't even tell you to this day why I'm terrified of them, but I am. But they ended the Ellsworth horse program, and I fought really hard to get it back, and we did.
Yeah.
Because those boys, when you meet them as adults, they might not remember their primary counselor or my name, but they remembered their horse's name.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And when you retired, Cheryl, you started as a bachelor's level social worker. What were you when you retired?
I was chief clinical officer. St. Francis supported and paid for me to get my master's degree at KU back when KU was the only program. Because my goal was I wanted to be a therapist level so that I would have input on what happened. And so even before we got contracts, we were evolving as a program. We took insurance. We were freestanding psychiatric hospitals back then. So we didn't have therapists. And so we moved from a primary counselor model to a therapy model. I became director of clinical. And then when we started in 2000 or 1996, 2000 with the contracts is when I moved to the corporate office. Okay. Didn't want to go, but that same thing, all I could think of was, if I can influence the kind of staff we hire, then our clients will be so much better well served than if I'm just serving them myself.
It goes without saying. I introduced you as legends of St. Francis Ministries, and I think that's true, and I hope you'll accept it. But I think when I think of the organization as I know it, as I've come to it in the last couple of years, so much of who we are seems really shaped by the work you both have done over the years. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you became friends.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier too. Cheryl and I had known each other and worked together, and we're good professional colleagues. But we were friends, but we really became very close when Hurricane Katrina hit in Mississippi. We had several programs down there. And Cheryl and I at that time had both moved to the corporate office and were in more administrative roles at that part of our career. And Hurricane Katrina was such a traumatic event for the kids we had there, for the staff members as well, for every community we were at. We had board members in Mississippi, and having gone through that experience, helping pull those programs back together, helping the staff and their families. Reaching out with the board members, that really, I think you go one or two ways in situations like that. You either become very, very good friends, or you end up kind of going your separate ways. And fortunately for us, it made us even stronger as friends, as colleagues as well too. Because we often came through things, different approaches, because
we disagreed a lot.
We did.
We would have knockdown dragouts.
We would.
Frenemies is what I'm hearing.
Always
more than
friends.
that, always friends.
Very respectful. Fantastic. We were very fortunate to work together that way. And I would be really negligent if I didn't add Corey Rathbun to that discussion, because he had everything to do with us expanding and growing like we did financially, program-wise. And so he was working there at the same time, and it was just an amazing time for us.
And Cheryl, for the viewers at home, tell us who's Corey.
Oh, Corey's my husband.
And Corey was my boss for many, many years.
And Corey is why I stayed. Mostly, that was my second reason for staying at St. in Ellsworth, was meeting Corey and marrying him 5.5 years later. And but I think our love of St. Francis is, definitely.
I think one of the advantages St. Francis had was that as we began to expand in 2000, a little bit before that, and do different works in the community, doing more community-based services, having people that had previously actually done the work with the kids, kind of that frontline work, that we really understood as a team and a group what these kids needed on an everyday basis. How we could help the families
and
the
the
most
families
as well.
What they needed.
So.
And then we simply, at that point, it just took off to where it is today.
Yes, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of growth over the years. Have run into a lot of excellent people. We were excited when you came on board, Father Andrew.
Thank you. Tell me, when you think of an organization like ours, a nonprofit social service kind of agency, to have gone the distance 80 years, some things had to stay kind of consistent. What's the heart? Would you guys think of what makes St. Francis so special?
The spiritual piece, being able to talk about our spirituality, regardless of what religion,
Mm-hmm.
the therapy in Christ. And I know we say that, and there are religions that aren't Christian,
Mm-hmm.
but they still believe in that higher power. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is what has made us different. And honestly, like having your position.
Yeah.
I mean, I never didn't work with an Episcopal priest. And just the ability to talk with families
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that it was important to understand their culture, their spirituality,
Yeah.
their traditions. I think that set us apart from anybody else. I
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. One thing that we really, I feel the heart of St. Francis is, we would be able to say prayers before meetings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had daily services for the kids out at the residentials.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be uncommon for us to sit down on Monday morning, each of us going to different churches throughout
Mm-hmm.
the area and talk about the sermons. And, we were surrounded by colleagues too that were deep in their faith as well.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped everyone.
Yeah, in my role, one of the things I truly love, sort of channeling a little bit the spirit of Father Bob Mize,
Mm-hmm.
is to go around and to talk to our staff and sort of know that that spiritual topic isn't off limits,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's part of who we are. And more times than I can count,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, tell me why you're here, or tell me what you love about working at St. Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what I hear back is, well, this is my calling, this is my
Mm-hmm.
vocation.
Right.
I feel like God put it on my heart to do this kind of work, to be with kids and families and to help them.
It's not just a job.
It's not. It's really not. And
Father, we had one of our priests after we started child welfare work, that if a child died,
mm-hmm.
we would, and the family was not connected to a church, we would do the funeral for that family. Do you remember that?
I do.
It was so moving and so impactful. And I don't know that other organizations would have actually done the funeral. And our, your position, our priest would be able to go visit families. Staff would call and say, this family needs this. Can you come help?
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what state they were in. In fact, this one priest that I particularly remember, his adopted son was a resident at Ellsworth.
Mm-hmm.
So I first met him as a father.
Yeah.
And then later as a father.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But yeah.
And a lot of Father Bob's relatives and other people are very involved with St. Francis in the early
Atchison
years.
program too. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it, you're both speaking to this sense of St. Francis has been about the local communities where we serve. It's been about, not just sort of physical well-being or mental health, although both of those things are very important. It's also been about that spiritual health and that spiritual outlook. And it makes, I mean, I'm of the opinion that it makes it, maybe not easier, but certainly possible to sustain working long term when you face the challenges that our staff sees and the people they serve.
Yeah, it's a difficult job, even on your best days. You're seeing a lot of traumatic issues that have happened with these kids and families throughout the years. And, I think that spiritual basis gives everybody hope.
Mm-hmm.
And hope was so important with these kids and families.
Yeah.
Do you remember Hurricane Katrina when we were down there at the Blueberry Inn?
I do.
And it was so traumatic. These poor staff I think the kids actually did better than the staff because the kids were being cared for, but the staff were it was so difficult. And Trish and I would go back to the inn at the end of the day, and we were reminiscing about when she was weepy, I would be strong. When I was weepy, she would be strong. But the thing that we had, no matter what, was the ability to hold hands and pray and just say, okay, I need a prayer right now. I need to do this.
Yeah.
That and running.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned the running earlier. So, what's the running about?
Cheryl had been an avid runner for years, and I had always played a lot of sports, but, I was getting to the point I didn't have the ability to do that anymore. And with Cheryl, I started running, and I probably was able to run about 10 years. And the amount of thanking and the cleansing and the healing you can do just for yourself, being out on a road running. And that really brought us closer together too. Most runners will tell you, you really have a bond with somebody when you're pitting in that third or fourth mile and it's getting pretty tough.
Mile number 5.
Yeah. And she's having to slow down so I can keep up with her. So.
And I was never a sports person. That's what's really funny is Trish grew up very athletic. I grew up very non-athletic. And started smoking cigarettes in high school. And I love them.
Oh, Cheryl.
And so I know it was awful. I just loved them. So at 26, I made a decision to quit. I think Corey may have never married me if I hadn't.
Okay.
But I was so hyper and I started running, and it trade one addiction for another.
Yeah, there you go.
And I still do. I still run 5-6 miles.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one particular morning after Hurricane Katrina, it was the holidays, and we'd get up early and be out running by 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we'd be running through the town that had been hit hard.
Yeah.
It was just north of New
Yes.
Orleans. And, they were bringing in FEMA trailers for New Orleans where all that devastation had happened.
Yeah.
And we got stopped by a train. And next week was going to be Christmas. And Cheryl and I are standing there after having run several miles, watching this train go by
with all these trailers.
With all these trailers. It just brought us to tears because
Yeah.
none of those families had homes. And we stood there, I don't know how
Just
long.
bawling.
Yes.
Both
And
of us.
hundreds of trailers going down there to help them.
Nonstop. Yeah. Yeah. I think both of you speak to something that I also find powerful, both about running, although it's been a while since I got out there. But that sort of meditative state that you can get in when you're doing that kind of exercise that really does tie the body and the soul together and helps us sort of see that we're more than just physical beings, that we're also deeply spiritual beings, and that we do our best. We're living most deeply into who God has called us to be. We let our hearts be open to both the suffering and the joy. And I think that's the remarkable thing I find across St. Francis is, for as hard as the work is, there's just so much laughter. There's so much joy. There are people who clearly love sort of being together and working together. And I really have to believe that that's a huge part of what our organization makes a difference.
Yes.
Especially for folks who can't quite see over the horizon or can't imagine that there's going to be a better day coming.
That there's hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think hope is a big, huge.
It is.
Yeah.
So as we've been talking, you've been sharing some stories about from both of your careers. I think we've kind of talked about sort of what brought you to St. Francis and what kept you at St. Francis. But you both have retired from St. Francis, and it's pretty remarkable to have a 36-year career, a 45-year career in a place. If you can sort of sit back for a second and say, well, what's the main thing? What's the big thing that you took away from your time, from both of your times at St. Francis? What would it be?
Wow.
That's
Go
a
ahead.
deep question. I'm going to have to think about
All
this
right.
for a little bit.
I think for me, and I've maintained this even after retirement, being part of something bigger than yourself, and that the world is so much bigger than yourself. And when you think about Jesus, when you think about Father Bob, who said, "This world is way bigger than me," that we're an instrument for that. And so I'm on a couple of community foundation boards, very active in that, very involved in my church. I think I've become Father Stanley's assistant. But I love that, taking care of our parish family. And I've done a couple projects for St. Francis. I will always love that. But I think being an instrument of peace, that whole prayer, you have to live your life that way. And that's what's important to me. Yeah. That's what I take away from it.
Fantastic.
And I won't recite the prayer. I could, but I won't.
Well, we can.
No, I'm kidding. I could, but I won't.
Yeah.
What do you think, Trish?
Well, when you think about it, I 100% agree with what you just talked about. I think that one of the things for me as well, in addition to that, the spiritual part of it is, St. Francis always supported their employees to take care of their own families. And, Cheryl and I were in pretty high level positions for a while, and it's pretty demanding.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we were always put our families first. We both did. And it was expected, and we always expected our employees. I don't think you can do other families much help if you're not able to take care of your own family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to, emphasize that we're employees, but we're also moms, working moms. We have children at home.
Yeah.
We got to watch each other's children grow up.
Yeah.
And so it's just a pretty remarkable thing. And now that I'm retired, to be able to spend that time with my family.
And with your grandkids.
Right. And grandchildren.
Yeah. Grandkids are everything. That's what I hear.
They are.
So.
I don't know. I'll get to find out in a month.
Yeah.
My
Congratulations.
first one.
Yeah.
So Trish has been prepping me.
Yeah. Good.
But you know what's phenomenal is I always felt very strongly that, at our programs, the Episcopal priest was usually the director, and then that changed, and it was the CEO was always the director or a priest. And when Bill took over, the thing I admired about him is that he kept that as a focus as well, that families are first, and you have to take care of your family. And he made sure we were taken care of as well. And so, it kind of made me wake up to, okay, it doesn't have to be an Episcopal priest to have that vision. And he certainly does. And I always felt that way.
Yeah, I would agree. He's been a good leader for the organization.
Yeah, he has. And I know what you're talking about. I remember being up in the Salina office probably about 6 o'clock in the evening. He said, what are you doing here? Go home. Get going. Yeah. So speaking of family, I mean, at least Trish, for you and for both of you, really, St. Francis has been a family affair. So we're not without a Bryant to this day.
Oh, that's right.
True. I'm very fortunate that, shortly before I left, my daughter joined the team. My youngest daughter, Morgan, joined. And, it's just been a real joy. She grew up knowing all about St. Francis, knows Cheryl very well.
Yeah.
And, it's just pretty remarkable. I know these days not many people stay at jobs that long. We may be the last of a generation where we put in that many years in an organization, but I just really couldn't see myself leaving because, you become so close to the other employees and they're doing such the hard work, day to day with the children and families. And we had been there at one point. And so our goal was to support them as much as we could. In fact, we got a text from the person that took Cheryl's job after she retired. She was on her way to Mississippi and said, I've been thinking about you girls. And
do you want me to save you a seat? And I'm like, absolutely. I want to go so bad. In fact, the past director of that program still comes to Kansas and hunts deer during deer season, Jason. And in fact, our oldest son, not our oldest, our second son, has autism and severe ADHD. And he actually is served by our psychiatric APRN because no one else was doing it right. They just kept messing things up. And Jared does really, really well with his services there. And he's on speed dial.
Well, and he is also somebody who has supported St. Francis with
and
his
I totally
philanthropic
left
efforts.
that out.
Yeah, say something about it.
He has, Jared, through his work with autism, I have to describe him. He's like 5'3" and weighs 100 pounds wet.
Yeah.
He is so tiny.
He's a little guy.
And he has done 4 or 5 fundraisers. One of them is a punk rock fundraiser for St. Francis that he did. But his last ones have just been, I don't want alcohol. It needs to be a family event. A lot of kids came, and several of them, more than several, had autism. Their parents brought them. And he does this whole game thing and brings in bands. And I think last time he raised, 2 times ago, he raised $10,000. This last time, I think it was 5 or 6. But it's all donated to the residential program so they can have a sensory playground. So that, as Jared says when he talks, I want other kids to have, they don't have what I have. They don't have a mom and dad and a brother and sister like I have. They need something, so I want to donate to that.
I love it. And again, just one another thing that just speaks to how special a place St. Francis is. I want to do something goofy, but so
Okay.
bear with me for a second. If you can think back, 45 plus years, 36 plus years to the person you were when you first took the summer job in the horse program, when
Right.
you first came thinking, I'm not sticking around Kansas, what, who was that person? What would you say to that person about what they were about to get themselves into?
I would probably say be patient, because you will learn a lot from other people
Mm-hmm.
and you will grow in so many different ways. And once I had my own children, how I perceived some of these kids that didn't have the mother and father there, it became a whole nother ballgame for me.
Mm-hmm.
My empathy just kind of went through the roof at that point, thinking, you have this beloved child that's your own and you're taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened if I hadn't had the advantages I had from my parents,
Yeah.
my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
all the love and support I had growing up, and then having my own children? It really started to impact me after I'd had my own, that how important this job was, that we were really out there filling some of those holes that these children had in their lives.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mine might be a little different. I think I would say to me back then, you have no idea how lucky you are. So we moved a lot. And even though my goal was not to stay in Kansas, how lucky I was to have a job that was so fulfilling. And the other part I would say that was lucky, well, my husband, of course, but with St. Francis is I think it made me a better mother in a way that I would not have been had I not had those experiences with families and kids and the staff who mentored me like you would not believe.
Yeah.
I believe it prepared me better to be a mom to a boy who had so many challenges growing up, and being patient with the teachers as they didn't understand what they were dealing with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it made me a better clinician because I realized that helping parents with challenged kids, whether it was autism, behavioral acting out, ADHD, any of those things, that what you do today doesn't change tomorrow, but it shapes the future. So don't give up.
Yeah.
And I think put all that together, I would say to me, how lucky you are, Cheryl.
Yeah. One of the challenges that you both know from the latter parts of your career and continues to be a challenge for an organization like St. Francis is retention. It's hard to keep people in some of these jobs because it is so demanding. It is so can be very physically challenging, and the kids and families we sometimes work with can be truly very challenging. And part of what I'm hearing you both say is, if you can kind of get over that hump, if you can kind of push through some of that, certainly with all the support that a place like St. Francis offers, there's something truly fulfilling on the other side of the challenge.
Yes.
And we've all said it in one way or another. It's more than just a job, right?
It really is. It is so much more than just a job. And I think maybe sometimes that's what kind of facilitates some of that turnover, because it is so hard when you first start to work with these families and children that have experienced so much in their short lives already.
Yeah.
But, being, like I said, being patient, knowing that things are going to get better for these families and children, and we just keep evolving.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are really, really important things to, if we could share the Trish Bryant and Cheryl Rathbun wisdom to today's version of those young people, who by all measures, are people who want to make an impact in the world, and sometimes maybe a little impatient around that, but nevertheless, their hearts are in the right place. I think their heads are in the right place. It's just keep going, just keep persevering, and you both have a wonderful witness to that. So we've talked a little bit about the past and a little bit about your guys' history there. Let's talk maybe a little bit about the future, as you both have recently retired. What do you see kind of in the future of St. Francis? We love having you around. We'll bring you back every time, I promise. But tell me a little bit about sort of where you see us going. What do you think?
I think myself, I was more in the administrative role towards the end of the years. I think everything's going to continue to become more community based.
Mm-hmm.
I think as if they could work with all the outside entities, as you bring more people in to help you in the job that you're doing
Mm-hmm.
and can get the funding to help support that.
Yeah.
I see St. Francis going more community based all the time.
Yeah.
And reaching out to families and maybe earlier prevention work.
Mm-hmm.
That's always where I would have liked to see us go. And I think they were trying to move further that way because
Yeah.
I think prevention would help so much. But it's hard to get people to fund prevention services.
Right.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's the first thing to go is prevention.
Right.
So what I could see to piggyback off of Trish is that we spend equal amount of time working and collaborating with state and federal and other organizations like us to continue to emphasize and research and put all of the interesting data and analysis in how much, if we did preventative, like Trish was talking about, get there in those early days, you would be spending so much less
on the back end.
And those kids would not be in residential.
Right.
They would be with family or relatives of the parents, and not even foster homes. Because if you talk to kids that have been in foster homes, as many good stories there are bad, and those kids still feel traumatized by that move.
Yeah.
So I think if we were able to continue that higher level collaboration, Trish and I both sat on committees, federal committees, Child Welfare League of America, Joint Commission. I'm trying to think of some of the others, but to be really the rural committees, to be really involved with them on what's the best practice to not have to do the back end work. And that's what I would see St. Francis doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely that prevention world is something that we've got to keep pushing for. I mean, there's sort of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we always want to see families whole. We want to see kids thriving. We've talked a lot about Father Bob's vision for what that looks like. And my own experience is I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to meet some of the old boys, some of the original residents from those programs. And to a person, they say, I wouldn't be who I am today if it weren't for the way I was treated in the St. Francis home, that I was valued and I was given a path forward. And maybe that we the word we'd use today is, sort of prevention for that. Right. But again, he was so ahead of his time.
Yeah.
That, in some sense, like our future really is also kind of circling back around to the real values of our founding father, our founding history.
Well, you just referenced he gave them a home that they didn't have.
Yeah.
And no matter what, it was a home, and they were valued, and they were in the community and respected. And I think as things had circled around, their stays in foster homes and residentials were much lower, so that wasn't that sense. So we talked a lot about prevention, but ultimately getting a family, having them feel a part of a family and a community. And that's...
Yeah.
So simple, so challenging.
It is, right.
Yet, just really so beautiful too. And I've really appreciated the opportunity to sit with you both today. Like I said, we'll always have you back. You're always welcome at the St. Francis table. We've said it before. We'll say it again. Thank you both, Cheryl, Trish, for everything you've done in your careers over the years, being a part of the St. Francis family. It's been a delight to chat with you guys today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Nice seeing you.
Good to see you too.